Yes, thank you for that. I'm in the Philippi horticulture area. I'm a small farmer there, and I'm actually a very bad farmer. I spend more time, trying to protect our area in the campaign than actually on the farm. And so, I'd rather be, I have a t-shirt that says, I'd rather be farming. But I'm from the Philippi area, and this area is becoming very, very important. It's always been important, but now it's become even more important. Because our area has become the custodian, not only from where your food is coming from. Over 200,000 tons of vegetables are coming from our area and reaches you on your plate via the supermarkets and hawkers and so on. But now our area is also important because of the aquifer. You may have heard that the mayor has decided that she's going to not pursue desalination, but she's going to pursue extracting water from underground, from our groundwater resources. Now, our area has got this aquifer, and this aquifer is called the Cape Flats Aquifer. So our area, so this aquifer is an underground body of water. Just think of it as a sponge, right? So, and this sponge is where we get when we put our well point down, we get water from there for our irrigation. But we know, since we had 2 aquifer seminars in 2013 and then again in 2016, that this aquifer is a very valuable source of water for the city, all right? So there are estimates that about 30% of the city's water can come from there. And now the mayor has decided she's going to extract water out of the aquifer and I think the figure is around about 80 million liters a day. And we are delighted about this because this is a much cheaper option than diesel. But we are afraid that if we extract out of this aquifer, this body of water, and you're not putting water back in, then you have an imbalance. And then this aquifer could lead to drying up. Salt water intrusion can happen from the coast because it's a coastal aquifer. And then you have sinkholes above ground. And you could have land subsiding, and all these are the disadvantages or the concerns around extraction. So our message is clear that, Madam Mayor, if you want to extract from the aquifer, please think about the recharge plan. Now, what is the recharge plan? The recharge is using available water to put back into the system, all right? So what is available water for us? And I think before I continue with that, and I think I want to just say that, we're in a small window of opportunity here. The crisis is a window of opportunity. And if we don't have the right information about, for example, where our new water is going to come from, and how we have to fix our relationship with water, then 2 things can happen. One, that we will have people who are called so-called experts provide us with a solution, right? Or we can together provide the solution, and we can put in place long-term sustainable and regenerative solutions. Now, if you talk about sustainability, it's about how you sustain your resource. But if you talk about regeneration, it's one step further. It says, so you've got wastewater, for example. How do you take the wastewater and turn it into clean water? That's regeneration of our resources. And so our area offers that opportunity. So I think this crisis is a window of opportunity for us to reevaluate our relationship with water, but it's also a metaphor for the commodification of our water, if we are not careful. And also, it's an opportunity for us to actually take back our power from politicians and become active citizens. We have fought for this new democracy. But we have given over our power as citizens to politicians. And we all know what that has led to. Now, this is not only in the national arena, but this crisis points that we actually have a political crisis right here in our city and province as well. So we really have to do, we have to use this opportunity in a way that we as citizens benefit from the solutions that are provided.
Within the modern South Africa in 2012, we don't know if you can remember, but we had the World Summit on Sustainable Development held here within our country, in Johannesburg in 2002, that was. So I want to say a few things now with regard to what's the difference between the way the word sustainability or development was used for the very first time when the World Council of Churches met for the first time on African soil in 1975, as opposed to how it was used in the West or in modernity, as my colleague said. So I'm going to read from the last paragraph on the sheet. So development in Africa is closely associated with the approach that the World Council of Churches adopted in Nairobi in 1975. One of the differences here was instead of greater GNP, so instead of looking at a greater profit, which was the focus of the approaches in the sessions before this in Geneva as well as Uppsala in 1966 and 1968, those approaches were embedded in the modernization of society. So prior to 1975, the idea was if only the so-called developing world or the so-called third world, if only they could become more skilled in technology, if only they can be taught how to make more profit, they will be able to sustain themselves, okay? But what was fascinating when I did a bit of reading was when it came to, in the 1975, at that particular conference on African soil, with more African participants, because it was in Nairobi, there was a shift. And the question that people were asking is not how much profit we can make, or how modern we can become, but what are the kind of values that we need to add to wanting to develop and to sustain ourselves. And for me, that is very fascinating, because that brought me to the whole question of, when we talk about values, we really talk about, okay, so you're not only going to try and make more profit, but you're going to try and make more profit in an honest way. Okay, and that shifts the goalpost at the time. So the second paragraph on the second page. So the meaning of sustainability is widely accepted as the responsible use of resources without jeopardizing the availability of resources for future generations, as Nazeer has said. It is assumed that the resources are available, so the water is there, I guess. Okay? And in fact, the book of Genesis reminds us that God created the universe and provided resources for all creations. So water should be available. As we've heard now locally, where water is situated. Let me say something about the Christian and particularly the Anglican understanding of water. So water has got a significance that goes way back, even before the way we understand the church now. Genesis 1 verse 2 reminds us that the idea of water is as old as creation itself. Within the New Testament, water took on a symbolic form that depicts newness, and here I'm talking about baptism. We're talking about newness, renewal, transformation, change, and the future. Romans 6 verses 3 to 4 reminds us that just like Christ took on a new form at the resurrection, we too are new creatures through our baptism. Okay, this is from a Christian perspective. At the 1988 Lambeth Conference, and the Anglicans will know this well, baptism was also affirmed as the mark of our calling. And I quote, "Every baptized and confirmed member must share in God's mission to the world." On my own reflection, when I take these two together, this is the point I want to make today, I guess, is that when I think of who I am within this theological framework that I'm presenting, I cannot only think that I was created and there, that is it. But I think of that I was created with a responsibility. I was created to respond to creation that God created ultimately. So who are we? Our identity, is both about our makeup, so we are made in the image of God, but it is also about our calling, okay? not only as Christians, I guess, but also even beyond in other faiths, our calling in our relations with other people and the rest of creation. So to have responsibility over our behavior and action. So to ask who we are is to address our responsibility towards God's creation. And here it is important to read Genesis 1 verse 27 with verse 28. This implies that the identity of persons is not only to be created in the likeness of God, but to be responsible for the rest of creation. And as you know, creation is not static but dynamic. So we have this crisis, then we don't have the crisis. It's always changing. It is creative, it is growing. And we have the inherent responsibility for the well-being of the other and for the well-being of God's creation. So let me just conclude by saying that within the Christian tradition, it is for me clear, that sustainability goes around my responsibility towards what is happening, in whichever way that's going to be. We can have choices, but some people choose not to do things. Why do they do that? But if I think of the fact that I am a being of relationship and I've been created to take responsibility, then it is my responsibility and my individual and collective responsibility to look at the crisis from a theological perspective. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.